This is the 50mm f2 TT Artisan lens. When it comes to lenses, everyone needs a 50mm.
Yep.
It's one of the most versatile focal lengths, and it's the focal length that most closely resembles how we perceive our environment naturally with our eyes. I had never heard about TT Artisan before they reached out to me to review this lens, and upon checking out their website, it seems like they're in the business of supplying a variety of budget lenses. Now, budget doesn't necessarily mean bad. I've shot with $50 lenses and I've shot with $4,000 lenses, and the difference between a cheap lens and an expensive lens usually involves the speed of the lens, the sharpness, the overall performance, and the construction of the lens itself. But to me, the most important aspect of a lens is the unique character profile that it provides. For example, my Canon R6 Mark II has an RF mount, and while the RF glass is considered better by most standards, I usually opt to put on an adapter and shoot with my older EF glass just because I like the look profile better. So when I saw the $69 price tag on this lens, I didn't immediately dismiss it and went out shooting with it with an open mind, and I'm glad I did. Before we start looking at the visual characteristics of this lens, I should probably talk about the build quality really quick first. Being that this lens comes with a $70 price tag, I was expecting a cheap feeling lens in a plastic housing. My 50mm RF 1.8 and EF 1.4 both feel cheap and are constructed almost entirely with plastic. But when I took the TT Artisan out of the box, I was pleasantly surprised how it felt. Its construction is entirely of metal and glass, and it's got a nice weight to it even though it's a pancake lens and is therefore quite compact. The focus ring has a healthy amount of resistance when turning it, and the aperture ring has a satisfying mechanical click when adjusting between stops. So right out of the gate, it did feel pretty nice in the hand, but that doesn't really mean anything unless it also looks nice on the camera. So let's start talking about that. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the sharpness of this lens, or perhaps lack of sharpness is a better way to put it. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, and by no means is this lens dull. It's sharp enough to capture detail for sure, it's just softer than the glass I'm used to using. And frankly, I'm okay with that. I reduced the sharpness and clarity in most of my photos, so I just look at this trait as saving me a step in my editing process. One thing to note about this lens is that there is no autofocus, so you'll be pulling focus manually when you're shooting with it. I haven't shot film in over a year and a half now, so it's been quite a while since I've had to focus manually when shooting photos, but I honestly found myself having a lot of fun with this lens. Focusing manually means you have to take more time when composing your shots, but slowing down while you're shooting and taking your time with things can sometimes be really beneficial to the creative process. You might notice different angles or things that you might have missed if you were just busy snapping away, letting the autofocus do its thing. In regards to the manual focus, I did find myself occasionally bumping the aperture ring with my finger while pulling focus just due to the proximity of the two rings to one another, but this is a compact lens, so I feel like I can't really deduct points for that. Something I haven't touched on yet that could be a big issue for some is the vignetting. This lens has a lot of vignette, which to some may be a deal breaker. Personally, I add vignette to virtually every single one of my portraits, so I don't really mind it, and it's something that isn't too difficult to remedy in post if you'd like to get rid of it, but it's definitely strong enough that it's worth mentioning. Here are some side-by-side photos I took with all three of my 50mm, the RF, the EF, and finally the TT. While they were all shot at the same aperture, shutter speed, and ISO settings, notice the difference in the characteristics of the images. The first thing you'll notice of the TT lens is just the massive amount of vignetting. I didn't do anything in post to remove any of it, just so you could see how much it does apply, and also notice how it isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just pulls more focus to the subject by darkening the corners. You can also see the big difference between the RF and the EF glass. Both of these lenses are cheaper versions of the EF and the RF glass, but they still exhibit similar characteristics. The RF I find just a little too sharp and the subject just pops out too much from the background, whereas with the EF glass, even though the bokeh is still really soft, I feel like the subject kind of just blends in more because the bokeh fall off just isn't quite so abrupt. The vignette also has this purple tint to it that's reminiscent of that purple window tint that used to be on vehicles all the time when I was younger. Depending on what you're shooting, this could be a huge hindrance, or it could be utilized as a creative effect to pull more focus to the center of the frame. Shooting video with this lens was actually pretty fun. The manual focus is smooth and there's no play in the wheel, so I wasn't spending much time getting my focus in, and the soft character of this lens just feels nice with video. It has a warm, cozy feel to it, especially when light enters it at the right angle, leaving you with this nice dreamy haze, and it reminded me of times in the past that I've shot with vintage lenses. All this combined with the fact that it's so compact and so cheap makes me think that it would be a great lens to bring along for some creative work if you want to be traveling light and don't have a lot of space in your bag. In conclusion, the vignette and lack of autofocus mean I won't be shooting anything professionally with this lens, but the way that it feels in your hand while you're shooting with it and the soft, dreamy qualities it can take on depending on the light that you're shooting with make it a really fun lens to use, and I'm definitely going to be using it for more creative and just passion projects in the future. And while it may seem like a big negative, the harsh vignette or other imperfections that come along with cheap glass or sometimes vintage lenses can often add to the enjoyment of creating and shooting with it. And again, you probably won't be shooting any professional gigs with it, but for a $70 lens that's this compact and feels this well constructed, I feel safe recommending it for anyone who wants a piece of glass in their kit that's versatile and fun to use, and also cheap enough that you don't really care if you lose it on a trip or something like that. So that's the end of my review. I know it was really short, but I'm not really one to get into the technical details of these things. There are other channels out there who review this lens and get really into the nitty-gritty pixel peeping details of it, so if that's more your jam, I definitely encourage you to go check those out. I wanted this review to be more just how did it feel to shoot with, and showcase some of the images that I took with it and some of the video that I shot with it, so that you could kind of get an idea of what you can create with this really cheap lens. If you like how the lens looked, I left a link in the description if you want to check it out, and don't forget to like and subscribe because I'm back every Monday with another video. And again, I'm so grateful for all the comments and the subs that I've been getting. I get that warm fuzzy feeling every time somebody leaves a comment and tells me my video helped them out, and I'm just blown away that I'm almost at 700 subs now since starting my channel just a month ago. So thank you guys so much for watching these videos and sharing them and checking them out. You guys are seriously so awesome, and I'm just gonna keep creating more content for you every Monday just because this is so fun for me. Anyways, keep on creating and I'll see you next Monday. Hard cut.